There is an African proverb that states, when two elephants fight, it is the grass that suffers. Some analysts note that this scenario is what is currently playing out between the Academic Staff Union of Universities ASUU and the federal government, with students being the proverbial grass. Recall that in February this year, ASUU declared a one-month strike which has now lasted for over 6 months. Research shows that since ASUU's first strike in 1998, ASUU strikes in Nigeria have been frequent over the years, that they have come to be recognized as an annual event. Since 1999, ASUU has gone on strike for a total of about 16 times, over different demands that include revitalization of public universities, earned allowance, improved funding, and promotion areas, amongst others. Already, some state government-run universities, non-teaching staff, as well as the Congress of Nigerian University Academics, are disassociating themselves from the strike. This brings me to the question, is ASUU strike still relevant? Well, on Nigeria Today, we will be focusing on the usefulness of ASUU strike. I'm Lydia Odijochi. Welcome to the program. With me to discuss the topic is Jide Ojo, Public Affairs Analyst. Glad to have you join us again in the studio.
My pleasure. Good evening, Nigerians. Happy weekend.
May Nasara Umar Kogo, a lawyer and public affairs analyst, will join us in the course of the program. Now, let me of course, you're the one I have here with me right now. Now, following recent negotiations with the federal government, ASUU has extended the current strike to an indefinite one. Now, what are your thoughts on this development?
Well, it's a very unfortunate development, very heartrending, very saddening that for the umpteenth time, ASUU has embarked on strike. It's not an annual event or biannual event, and but it takes two to tango. University is a social service. It's not an economic enterprise. Under our law, under the Constitution, is part of the Chapter 2, which is what the lawyers will call human rights and socio-economic rights. And for that reason, he who pays the piper dictates the tune. You cannot have a child and refuse to train that child and think that child will come out better than you are. So the fact that the federal government established these institutions, and I here say federal and state, because the education is on a concurrent legislatively, so you have federal, state, even local government are establishing schools, not necessarily university. I happen to have gone to a school established by Ibadan City Council, which later was changed to Ibadan Municipal Council. So local government also established schools, as well as states, as well as federal. But universities happens to be under the tertiary list, and for that reason, the schools that were established by government, which are called public institutions, are responsible. Government is responsible to these institutions financially and otherwise, in terms of staffing, in terms of promotion, in terms of discipline, in terms of just resourcing them. Now, what we have seen over the years is exponential increase in the number of student enrollment, while the number of capacity of these institutions have been very weakened. And because of the decays decadence that have besieged our institutions, not only academic institutions, even health institutions and other social engagements. It has affected our education sector in such a way that today, many of these ivory towers are no longer worthy of being so labeled. In fact, some will tell you they are just glorified secondary schools. And if you have to change that paradigm, if you have to change that dynamics, you need proper funding of these institutions. And because that has not happened over the decades, I happen to have gone to school in the early 90s. There was ASUU strike then. Many of us who are supposed to go for a 4-year course ended up spending 6 or 7. So it has been, even under the military, through to the civilian administration. Unfortunately, the economic climate of many of the countries around the globe is not healthy. In US, many students take students' loan to go to school. Some are on bursary, some are on scholarship. But they pay heavily. Now, because under our own law, it's a social amenity. Government is made to be the sole sponsor of these institutions. Now, obviously, government, because of competing demands, cannot meet many of its obligations to these institutions. In the First Republic, we have very handful of them. Second Republic, the number increased. Third Republic, the number. Now we have over close to 200 universities. State-owned, federal government-owned, privately owned. And now, the private ones, you will not hear that their staff went on strike because they are there for business. Yes. They are commercial entities, so they charge cost recovery rate. But universities cannot charge that. And because they cannot charge it, there is paucity of funds. And because there is paucity of funds, teachers could not be paid well. Infrastructure is overstretched. There are no welfare packages, as you find in other climes where students are made to pay for their education. So this shortfall is what is leading us to this incessant strike.
Okay. Now I still want to ask you, are strikes actually the only way to go? That's in solving all these problems?
Of course not. The answer is obviously not, is not in the affirmative. There are other means of resolving issues, but truth be told, the reason why strikes keep happening is failure of the government to adhere to terms of agreement. The much touted 2009 agreement the federal government signed with Academic Staff Union of Universities was disrespected. That was even under the, that agreement was signed under the late Umaru Musa Yar'Adua administration. After that, we have had Goodluck Jonathan administration, now Buhari administration. Why was there no adherence to that? That has lingered. Now, the Goodluck Jonathan administration, even by his own admittance on here in the course of this week, he said that ASUU was on strike at a particular time for 4 months until when he sat and resolved the issue in one night with all the relevant stakeholders. So this, what I'm saying invariably is that, yes, it's not, strike is not the only way to resolve this issue, but because government has failed to preempt, and preempting strike means having serious dialogue with the relevant institutions, union. If government calls these people when they send them notice of strike to say, look, we agree, we are at fault, we signed this agreement with you, unfortunately because of XYZ, we have not been able to keep to terms of that agreement, but bear with us. I believe that dialogue, which did not take place, because when there's no union under the Nigerian labor law that I know will go on strike without first giving either 21 days notice or 7 days notice. You know, after the 21 days notice, you still give 7 days notice, after which you now go on strike. If in that period of 21 days notice, instead of saying, we've never seen any correspondence from ASUU, we don't know that they are going on strike, pretend I'm playing the ostrich. If in that period you summon them to a meeting and you explain things to them and ask, and you know, it's like somebody who is a defaulter. Maybe one is failing to pay his rent as at when due. Then you fail to go and meet your landlord and rather absconded, or you leave home very early in the morning and come back late in the evening. So one day the landlord cornered you and said, hey, you've been running on this way. You can only run, you cannot hide. So you know what I'm saying is that it is obvious to all well-meaning Nigerians that government pulse is almost empty.
Of course, of course.
And the fact that these institutions need billions. In fact, what was estimated as at 2013 under Goodluck Jonathan, when they signed a memorandum of action, was that there is a need for 1.2 trillion to be injected to revitalize university. Out of this 1.2 trillion, I think the entire package, from what ASUU is telling the public, is only about 220 billion has so far been released. And this is supposed to be released 200 billion every year for 6 years. Now, from 2013, Goodluck Jonathan released 200 billion. From there, no government has released any. Now, when the ASUU went on strike in 2020, government released 20 billion.
Okay.
That has been it. So, who has reneged? So, I agree that strike is not the only way out.
Yes.
But if the relevant authorities have preempt by having ensuing dialogue to say, we know you have rights to what you are about to do, but please
bear with us.
Bear with us.
Okay.
I think.
Now, some analysts maintain that strikes have a crippling effect on the Nigerian university system, but we'll talk about that after this break. Okay.
Encouraging the federal government and ASUU to come to a meeting point. They should leave their comfort zones and then see what they can do to pour oil on a troubled water and then resolve it finally, because the students are the one being affected.
They should look at the students that are crying, and then they should try to have empathy for them. They should try to feel for them, and then imagine if they were in their shoes, how they would feel.
With this strike, it's just actually drawing my plans backwards. So I just had to go back to my business and learn more skills for myself.
In Nigeria today, we will know where the child goes to university, but where it will come out, you don't know. What are they doing? If their children are affected, they will not be doing what they are doing. For the government to just do away with ASUU, let their appointment be terminated and start afresh.
ASUU should at least, for the sake of humanity, for kind's sake, at least suspend it. You know, there are other shareholders who are affected by this strike. Like, for instance, the students and all this. They are Nigerians, and as a matter of fact, what have they contributed to suffer such? At least for the sake of humanity, at least for the sympathy, the country is down, there's no money. You understand? So at least they should support that.
Glad to have you back. You're watching Nigeria Today, and our focus is on the usefulness of the ASUU strike. I'm still with my now two guests, Jide Ojo, public affairs analyst, and also we have Nasara Umar Kogo, lawyer and public affairs analyst. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much. It's my honor to be here.
Yeah, you heard from the Nigerians what they had to say. Some
yes.
say, sack them,
yes.
Start afresh. How would you react to that?
Yes, paradoxically, you can look at it from the angle of, say, government is the employer, just sack them. But realistically speaking, you have to look at it from the developmental angle. All over the world, collective bargaining is an instrument for national development. And ASUU, you have to look at ASUU from the angle of, entrenching its contribution towards nation building. They have the feel, they have the belief that educational institutions, especially private, needs to be upgraded in all facets. Their demand is not restricted to the issue of wages only. When you take Section 8 of the Constitution that talks about the educational objectives, the government is under obligation to really do whatever it can to give the nation the best education in the interest of the development of the nation as a whole. So it is normal to have arguments, to have disagreements, and going by the fact that since 2009, the agreement that was agreed upon has not been implemented fully. Let me say fully, because successive governments tried it and then left it. Government is continuous. This government too should be commended for even saying that we have to see to the finality of it. It is the finality word that is bringing about all the brouhaha we are seeing over the past 6 months. And ASUU too should give the matter nationalistic feeling, because in the whole scenario, the children of the poor men are the ones who constitute the majority in the public institutions. And then when you look at it from that angle, and when you look at the doctrine of collective bargain, whereby it is not 100% of what you want, that you must stick your neck and say, I must get 100%, then you should give it that consideration. Government on the other side too should look at the ASUU from the angle of the developmental objective, the interest they have in entrenching better quality education. When we have this type of thing, then we have a confluence. The confluence is national progression, national peace and stability. But over and above, when you take the provisions of Section 8 that talks about the educational objectives, it is a square responsibility under Section 130 of the President. In a situation whereby various attempts by your lieutenants have not succeeded in bringing out results, then it is imperative on us to advise that since you have Vice President who is a professor, who is an academic, who is equally a more senior lawyer as a senior advocate of Nigeria, who has the expertise of adjudication of disputes, he has the two mechanisms that can be applied. One, his professorial rank as a professor in the university. Secondly, his legal position as one of the most seniors in the country. And then thirdly, even his position in the clergy sector. So when you take the combination of this, it is imperative to advise that if the Vice President can chair a panel, then probably Secretary to the Government of the Federation and the relevant ministers. And then the President should be definite to say before so date. Take the cue from what ex-President Goodluck Jonathan did in really steering it himself, chairing it up to the daybreak, talking about 48 hours negotiation, unbroken. But at the end of it, panacea was harvested at the end of it. So I advise the government to really look into it. Don't look at ASUU from the angle that they are going to the extreme. ASUU too should consider the fact that if we are to take the provisions of the Trade Unions Amendment Act of 2005, even the unionization under the ACTU doctrine is voluntary. It's not, they have no nexus then to say that all institutions should be closed down, because it's not all the members of the institutions that are ab initio, as far as the provision of 2005 Trade Unions Act is concerned, that are members of ACTU. So it should be voluntary, it should be something that you should go. But by and large, I think the two forces have already, stretched their nerves enough. I think national interest should supersede any other consideration. This is where statesmanship should come into play.
Okay. Now, let me still ask you, some analysts, like I mentioned to Jide before we went on the break, some analysts have maintained that these strikes have a crippling effect on the Nigerian university system. How would you react?
Well, not only Nigerian university system, but the Nigerian developmental indices generally. It has crippling effect on the economy. It has crippling effects on the general developmental sectors. Because, for example, now by the time you now leave universities, for a period of 6 months, they are just sleeping in the house. Then all the machineries and instruments of research have been turned down to the table. That is one. Secondly, you have created very serious problem. The children will be at home. They will constitute a nuisance. They will be unproductive economic suckers to the meager economic resources of the family, and that will expose them into so many problems, especially going by the security, social problems that we are facing. And then the most dangerous side of it is that at the level of the political participation now, there will be easy weapons to be used as laborers to commit violence and other atrocities during the election. So it is very, very important that we should get them back to the campuses, and then ASUU too should be patriotic enough to see how they will be able to bridge off the gap of all the losses. And then government too should give into consideration this idea of say no work, no pay. I think it will be too harsh for them, because the adverse effect will be on the quality of the teaching they will give and learning of the children when eventually the schools resume.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Wow. It's always very interesting having him on set. Okay, now let me tell you, let me ask you, in other climes, tertiary education is capital intensive and they adopt private government partnership. Should we adopt this here in this country?
Yes and no. Already is adopted by virtue of the fact that you have plurality of educational systems. There is private sector driven, there is public sector driven. So to that extent, unless you are saying privatize all universities, if that is what you meant, how would the children of the poor go to school? Because you need to consider it. That's why the Constitution also takes it as a social amenity. The derivative principle of the chapter 2 of the Constitution, you know, because if you commercialize education, if you privatize and commercialize, the point is, while some may be able to afford, many will not be able to afford. And those many who could not afford will become a threat to the few that can afford. So it's an enabler for you to choose. For instance, if you have the resources, I know my elder statesman here, you know, he could afford to send all his children to Harvard. It's his right. He has earned it. But for those of us who are struggling to
don't point at me.
begging God to have mercy on us, such opportunities should be there for us to choose where we want us to. And let me quickly put a rider to what my senior advocate has said. The issue at hand calls for statesmanship. This issue cannot be resolved by digging in by either parties. President Goodluck Jonathan has shown the way. If President Buhari sits, Vice President Osinbajo sits, the ministers, the ASUU, the Minister of Finance, and everybody work out a solution, it will be respected. Look, it's not just for the likes of former President Obasanjo, Ibrahim Babangida, Abdulsalam Abubakar to be converging about who becomes the next president. This is a matter of urgent and important. Okay. Let them also, if the Council of State or National Council of Education will have to meet to resolve, this should not go beyond this month. Because, like Alhaji has pointed out, campaigns starts the end of this month. And already, many of them are frustrated and can be easily lured to join
them. Now, let me ask you, we're trying to round up now. What should students be doing as this strike lingers briefly?
Well, students should go into extramural researches. For example, if I'm a student, I will see as much as possible the nearest business center. Go and acquire computer education. The future of education and literacy and development generally lies in ability to manipulate internet and other models of learning. So students should be encouraged to really go to nearby business centers and acquire e-education. They can acquire so many certificates through e-learning, which is the normal trend nowadays.
That's why, that's wonderful. Good advice there. Well, that's all we can take on the program, on this episode of the program. We hope that the lingering industrial action will be resolved soon, so that students can go back to school. We appreciate, and our appreciation goes to Jide Ojo, Public Affairs Analyst, and a regular on our program. Thank you.
My pleasure.
And also to me, Nasara Umar Kogo, lawyer and public affairs analyst. Thank you for your invaluable contribution.
And traditional ruler.
Thank you very much. Good day, Nigeria.
And to you, our viewer, thank you for being a part of this program always. But remember, tomorrow is another episode. You can always, on Monday, you can watch out for this, for another episode. And you can now watch out for this and other editions at www.youtube.com/NTNews24hub. I am Lydia Ojijochi saying, have a wonderful weekend.